Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to be making split pea soup. It has gotten quite wintry around here, so I thought a nice hearty, comforting soup would be perfect for the weather. This is a very traditional recipe. It's very easy to do. Takes a bit of time. A little planning is required, but very simple in terms of preparation. Some split peas, a little thyme, carrot, onion, and we're going to use some bacon. I often do this with salt pork, which is pretty traditional. People use ham, bacon. And this kind of recipe has been around forever, used on things like sailing ships. Transport some dried legumes and some salt pork, and you could make up a beautiful soup. Quality of ingredients on the old sailing ship might have been more questionable, but it's made generally to taste. Obviously, people have different preferences. Salt pork, bacon, ham. The theme there is just a salted, cured pork, bringing that richness and seasoning to the soup. As I said, this is the sort of thing that people generally just make to taste or according to their family recipe. My reference point today is from the Nordic Cookbook by Magnus Nielsen. This is a monster tome. I will talk more about that in a moment, but I'm definitely going to be going off script here relative to that. We're just going to make with what's at hand, and there's a few different ways to do this, but overall, keeping it pretty simple. And the first step really is to soak your peas. So we're going to get those going, and then we can talk a little more about the recipe. We'll prep our other ingredients and then get that soup simmering away. All right, so let's start by soaking these peas. I'm going to be using green peas. Could use yellow split peas as well. Obviously, in general, you could probably use any kind of green, really. We'll recklessly open our bag and get them into our bowl here. It's almost like we should use scissors to open bags. I'm going to give these a quick rinse. So we gave those just a bit of a rinse, and now we're going to cover generously with cold water. And we want to use cold water because we don't want these beans to ferment while they're soaking. They just need a few hours. It's often said to soak them overnight. I've heard that with modern beans, they're not quite so dried out. It takes less time to soak. Definitely if you're going overnight, you should soak them in the fridge so they stay cold and don't ferment. We'll just do a few hours and then we'll cook. Does soaking longer, shorter, how long you cook affect the texture and whatnot? Sure, absolutely. It's a good kind of question for the folks at Serious Eats or similar, but pretty simple to just soak these for a few hours, and then we'll cook maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours, kind of depending on the beans and the kind of final texture we're looking for. So I'm going to let those soak, and we can talk a little bit about the origin of the recipe I'm starting with. So as I mentioned, roughly working off a recipe for pea soup in the Nordic Cookbook by Magnus Nielsen. He's a chef. He ran the restaurant Feviken. I think that's how you say it, but definitely could be getting it wrong. A Swedish restaurant, 2 Michelin stars, one of the best restaurants in the world. But this cookbook he wrote is not like a fine dining cookbook. It's really a collection of a huge number of recipes from the different regions of Scandinavia, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, the Faroe Islands. And it's really more home cooking, cafeteria favorites, kind of classic, kind of more home Swedish dishes, along with some very more traditional things. Everything from like potato salad you might get in a cafeteria to, like fermented whale shark. It's quite the tome, as you can see here. It does have some really beautiful photography, landscape, and food photography as well. He provides a number of variations of the pea soup recipe based on the various countries involved. Base recipe, Norway, split pea soup in Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Faroe Islands, and Iceland. They're all pretty similar. Some variation in terms of the vegetables involved. We're just going with some onion and carrot. And I usually make this with salt pork, which isn't for everyone, but a very classic form of it. What I found interesting was many pea soups you encounter, particularly in the States, you have just like little chunks of bacon or ham in there. You think of like a classic Campbell soup, whereas he suggests that the meats be cooked in the soup but then sliced and served separately. So we're going with a little bit of that vibe here. As I said, I'm going to sub in bacon for the salt pork, and we're going to cook some in the soup with our other ingredients, and we'll save some for topping. And one good reason to do that is it keeps that bacon nice and crispy when you have it with the kind of thick soup. So with that said, we'll get started on some of our vegetable prep and our bacon. And then once those beans are ready, we'll get them cooking on the stove. All right, let's take care of our vegetables. Well, I initially wasn't going to do a beverage for the chef, as no pairing kind of screamed out at me. But then I was thinking about my comment about sailing ships, and I realized Swedish punch would have been a perfect thing to go for here. It's actually a product you can purchase that effectively is a grog, like rum and citrus and spices. It's meant to be watered down and served like a punch, kind of a more diluted alcoholic beverage. So I was like, well, we could play with that idea, maybe do a rum old-fashioned. I don't have any lime, but we did have some lemon. And of course, we associate rum and lime most closely together, but some rum beverages are made with lemon. And I read, interestingly, that lemon has quite a bit more vitamin C than lime does. So even though we associate lime with sailors and pirates, like limeys, more often it was lemons due to the higher content of vitamin C. So we're just going to play around with all these ideas. I'm going to make effectively a kind of rum sour type beverage. Going to add some bitters for a little complexity and maybe get it more in that grog punch ballpark. So really just kind of winging it here. But rum, citrus, and sugar, typically rum, lime, and sugar, pretty tried and true combo. I've got a little bit of sugar. Like I said, I was thinking about just doing an old-fashioned. We could have just put some sugar in the glass with bitters, added our rum, a little citrus garnish, and had ourselves a fine beverage. But let's play around with our lemon here to get that sour. Squeeze our juice here. I'm gonna have to strain this because there's a lot of seeds in this lemon, apparently. Alright, so grab my strainer here. Got our lemon juice. Get rid of those seeds there. Just gonna add a tiny splash of water. Since I used that granulated sugar instead of a syrup, I'm gonna just help this dissolve a little bit. Of course, the ice will dilute, but give ourselves a head start here. Kind of a wild sound. Going to use some Bitter Cube Jamaican number 2 bitters here. Zesty, tropical, and sharp. Grapefruit, hibiscus, allspice, and vanilla. Good stuff. Give a good dose there. A quick wipe down to keep things neat here. And for rum, we've got some Mount Gay Barbados rum, our Eclipse Heritage blend. For over 300 years, Mount Gay has been crafting deeply aromatic and rich rums in Barbados. Mount Gay Eclipse is a blend of rums distilled in traditional copper pot and column stills, then matured in American whiskey casks. It makes an iconic rum punch, or can be enjoyed with your favorite mixer. Relatively good price on this, and pretty tasty. Some poured out there. We're not sponsored, of course. I will add this. There we go. I've got some ice here. Okay, let's shake this up. As always, at a much lower volume. Okay, there we are. And this is the kind of drink that's good with ice, so I'm just going to use the broken ice in the shaker. Alright, there we have kind of a pseudo rum punch, rum sour with lemon and bitters. Hey, that's not bad. I do think the classic pairing with lime is ideal, but it definitely works, and if what I read is to be believed, then this will actually keep the scurvy away. Alright, let's get back to our soup. Alright, on the vegetable front, I'm gonna keep things pretty simple. Some of the recipes involve celery root, potato, rutabaga, leek. Really kind of whatever you wanted to do, but we're just gonna do some onion and some carrot. So let's go ahead and prep those now. Take off the root and the top. In half. Let's get this peel off. And I'm just going to chop this up fairly fine, not, super fine, but I don't want large chunks of onion in my soup. Just go down through our onion there. We'll slice through and just cut a fine dice. Not too particular, not too precise. I'll just grab a bowl to hold my onion here. Let's just slice the other half. Slice, chop. There we go, pretty simple. Clean up our carrot here, and we're just going to peel this. Don't really have to if you don't want to. Just gonna take off that tough outer skin. Alright, and for the carrot, cut this a little smaller. Let's just split it like a log, why don't we? Same for this little guy. Just gonna chop this into kind of smaller bits like the onion. And let's grab a little bowl for the carrot as well. Just getting that sliced up. Making sure to use that flat edge so we can safely slice. And the last bit here. There we go, quite straightforward. Just a bit of chopped onion and some chopped carrot. And then I have my sprigs of thyme ready to go to flavor our soup. Okay, so let's get the bacon cooking so we can complete the last component we'll need for our soup and get the peas going. All right, I am heating up my skillet here. Just gonna fry up some bacon till crispy. There's some different ways we could do this. Could fry it in the pot that we're gonna cook in and leave more of that fat in there, which will definitely give you flavor. But I'm just gonna do this where I crisp up some bacon, will crumble a little bit into the soup as it cooks, and reserve the rest to top with. So it'll be a nice crispy bacon topper. Let's get my bacon in the pan here. I have some really beautiful, flavorful bacon. I mean, it's their bad bacon, but the stuff is quite good and tasty. Gonna bring a lovely flavor and seasoning to our split pea soup. We're just gonna cook these, render the fat, get them nice and crispy, crumble up and add to our soup. Getting that incredible bacon smell. Just so powerfully mouth-watering. Just gonna let this fry here. Flip them over. Like I said, we're just trying to get these browned up and crispy. Starting to look so good, so appetizing. The aroma just so wonderful. If I was doing salt pork, I wouldn't be doing this fry step. Just toss it in with the split peas as they start to cook and let it offer up its seasoning. And then it could be sliced up at the end after you remove it from the pot. Could throw bacon into the pot in the same way. Get up with kind of softer bacon if you do that. Maybe that's not exactly what you want. Certainly get the flavor from it. If I'm using bacon, I kind of like to do it like this. Get some cooked up and added for the flavor, and then some at the end for extra crunch. Ham, kind of the same principle as salt pork, of course. Alright, these are starting to get browned up. Interesting heat distribution of this pan. Noticing the one that's not really where the main part of the flame is actually cooking the fastest, so keep an eye on that. Alright, this is starting to get nice and crispy and brown, so pretty good. Let's go ahead and get this pulled out of the pan. We'll get it onto a plate covered with a paper towel to absorb some of that grease. My gosh, so delicious looking. Alright, setting that on some paper towels just to soak up a little bit of the grease. And then I'm gonna place those on a tray. Just to keep those crispy while we prepare our soup. Okay, we've had a few hours of soaking. The peas are ready to go. I'm just gonna drain these off and get them added to my pot. I used the glass bowl for a little better view of what I was doing for the video, but typically you can just soak them in the pot that you're going to use. Simplifies things a little bit. So now just going to add water so we can start cooking these. Gonna add about 7 cups. It's gonna depend on how much the peas absorb the water, how much you're gonna need. I typically have to add a bit more as these cook. The liquid boils off and they absorb more of it. So we'll just keep an eye on that. Add some more here. We'll bring that up to a boil. I like my pea soup to be fairly kind of mushy in the end. The peas break up. It's up to you kind of what you're looking for. So we'll add water as we need as these cook. Over maybe the next couple hours. Definitely start checking at an hour and a half. But like I said, this is a recipe that you really do to feel. It's not a very prescriptive type of soup that you're making here. So one of the nice things about this soup, as I mentioned, is that it doesn't take a lot of effort. We cooked our bacon, we chopped our onion and carrot, and we soaked our peas, and that's really about it. The one thing we're gonna have to do as we start cooking here is skim any scum that forms off the top. Peas, when you're cooking beans, they really release this kind of foamy stuff, and we want to get that out of there. So over the first few minutes here, as it starts to boil, we'll skim that off. We have a nice clean soup to work with. Now a lot of recipes just say to, throw in your aromatics and spices or whatever at this point, but I hold off on that because we have that skimming that we're going to do. The things like the onion, or if you put in any dry spice, they're kind of going to be floating and get caught up in that foam. So you're kind of skimming them away. I find it's just easier to get yourself where you've taken care of that foam first. Then you can toss in your vegetables and spices. In this case, right, our onions, carrots, and thyme. And that way you don't have to worry about them. It's going to cook for plenty long time, so they're going to get nice and cooked. If you're adding other vegetables, his cookbook recommends, after about 30 or 40 minutes. For what we're doing, we can just put them in at the beginning, and it's going to be just fine. So let's get this up to a boil. We'll do a quick skim, and then really we can just take it easy because it just simmers away for an hour and a half, 2 hours, or however long it takes to cook your peas. Well, as you can see, we have developed quite the head of foam here. Just gonna go ahead and take a spoon and skim that off. So we're going to let that simmer away now that it's come up to a boil. Keep an eye on it here for a little bit. Skim away any additional scum that forms on the top there. And then I'm going to go ahead and add our other ingredients. Alright, this was a pretty foamy batch of peas, but we've basically gotten past that point. So I'm going to go ahead and add my other ingredients. Let's get our carrots in there. And the onion. I grabbed a small onion from the store. Sometimes go with half depending on the size. That's still plenty of onion. I don't mind it, but if you want to go with a little bit less, that can work too. And then let's get some bacon added. Just crumble that up. Get some of that flavor in there. Okay, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of white pepper. And then just a little bit of salt to add some extra seasoning along with what the bacon is giving us. Just to ensure we have some seasoning for our ingredients as they're cooking, but I'm not really adding kind of the final amount of salt here because as this cooks, it's going to reduce. I might add more liquid and that would change the volume that we're salting. So we'll wait more towards the end as we get a sense of the final kind of volume of soup to add more salt and get it to the right level of seasoning, just because there's so much variability in that liquid volume. And then the last thing we'll need before we just let this go is our sprigs of thyme to give that nice herbal flavor to it. Go ahead and drop those in. And now we just let this simmer away. And we'll check in about an hour and a half. I'll give it a stir occasionally, but it's pretty hands-off from this point on. Alright, the soup has been simmering away. I think we are basically done here. It's been about 90 minutes or so. I did add some more water, so it was kind of boiling away fairly rapidly. So I've added some more water to keep it kind of a thinner consistency. It's getting pretty thick as the water cooked off. And I do think it's about done, so I'm going to give it a quick taste. And yes, I do realize that it is in a different pot than when you last saw it for complicated reasons, which aren't really worth getting into here. Alright, so let's give this a taste. pretty tasty. I am going to give it a bit more salt. Like I said, we've added more water, didn't add a lot of salt up front, so tasting here at the end, I'm going to go ahead and increase the seasoning level to get it where I want it. Gonna let that cook a little bit longer to just kind of get integrated. I'm gonna add a touch of white pepper as well. All right, let's give that a moment, but we should probably be done here. Okay, let's go ahead and serve up our split pea soup. Okay, I'm excited to try some. Let's just ladle some into a bowl here. There we go, and now let's just crumble some of that bacon I made over the top here. And finally, let's have a taste. Very delicious. It just has that classic flavor. So comforting. The nice smokiness and saltiness from the bacon. Kind of the overall delicious, comforting feel you get from eating the soup is so nice. So I hope you've enjoyed making some split pea soup with bacon, and I hope you have a wonderful night.